When Michelle Phillips, the radiant star of her era and one of the unmistakable voices of the mamas and the papas, discovered the truth about someone who had been beside them all along, it was a revelation. But even more profound, more haunting, was the story of another member of the group. A woman whose heartbeat pulsed through every chorus, whose soul broke through the joyful harmonies even when a storm raged within her. Her name was Cass Elliot. On stage, she was electric. Audiences adored her for her charisma, her laughter, and that extraordinary voice no one could ever mistake. But behind the curtain lived another reality, one of struggle, loneliness, unrequited love, painful secrets, dangerous diets, and a lifelong battle with feeling like she never truly belonged. She was born Ellen Naomi Cohen in September 1941 in Baltimore, the daughter of Russian Jewish immigrants. Life was tough from the start. Her family had little money, but she carried within her a bright, magnetic energy, as if fate itself was drawn to her spark. She had talent, raw, vibrant, and deeply genuine, but she also carried something else, a pain that surfaced far too early. From a young age, Cass struggled with her body, with a weight that society relentlessly turned into a stigma. But when she joined her high school's drama club, that private world of emotion found a stage. Under the glow of makeshift spotlights in a rundown auditorium, she first felt what it meant to truly be herself, through voice, through movement, through song. It was then that she created a new name for herself, Cass Elliot. It was a shield, a cloak. Cass, after the witty comedian Peggy Cass, whom she adored, and Elliot, in memory of a lost friend. Behind that name, she grew stronger. It was as if she had found a second skin, unshakable, bold, ready to push forward. With this newfound confidence, Cass made a bold move. She dropped out of school, a reckless but honest leap of faith. She went to New York, hoping to conquer the Broadway stage. But New York was cold and unwelcoming. After a heartbreaking setback, a coveted role went to an unknown newcomer named Barbra Streisand. Cass realized just how brutal the theater world could be. So she turned to music. Music didn't judge. Music didn't care about dress sizes. But as she would soon learn, even music had the power to wound. In the early 1960s, Cass Elliot, not yet known to the world as Mama Cass, was walking a fragile, uncertain path toward her dream. With quiet determination and a spark of hope that never dimmed, she fought her way into the music world. She sang as if her very life depended on it, and in many ways, it did. Her voice wasn't just a talent. It was her soul turned inside out. She started out with the Big Three, then moved on to the Mugwumps. These bands didn't climb the charts, but for Cass, they were stepping stones. Not only toward the stage, but toward the people who would shape her life in profound ways. Among them was Denny Doherty, a smooth voice with a soft smile and a Canadian accent. Cass fell for him, deeply and earnestly, with that kind of open-hearted intensity only a woman who dreams not just of music but of love can feel. She was ready to move mountains for him, but fate had its own tune to play. In a strange twist of irony, Cass's heart stayed close to Denny, but never quite where she wanted it to be. In 1963, she got married not for love, not for passion, but for convenience. James Hendricks, guitarist for the Mugwumps, needed a way to avoid the military draft. The marriage was a formality, nothing more than ink on paper. Cass knew that, and when the band fell apart 8 months later, so did the marriage. She left, quietly hoping that Denny would follow. But he didn't. Denny joined a new group, the New Journeymen, with John and Michelle Phillips. Suddenly, Cass was on the outside looking in, still holding on to hope, but watching it fade like smoke. She wanted in. She wanted to sing again, to be near Denny, to be heard. And she knew her voice wasn't just good. It was rare, deep, powerful, like a river on the edge of breaking its banks. Denny knew it too. He could feel it. Without Cass, there would be no magic. But there was John Phillips, driven, disciplined, with a very clear image of what his new group should sound like. According to him, Cass's voice didn't quite fit. But the truth was harder to swallow. It wasn't her sound John rejected. It was her look. Behind the scenes, the quiet verdict wasn't about harmonies. It was about appearance. John thought Cass didn't fit the image. Too heavy, too unconventional, too different. And so began her real fight, not just for a place in the band, but for the right to exist as she was. For recognition, for dignity, for the simple truth that talent doesn't have a dress size. Cass didn't give up, even when love wasn't returned. Even when the door to the stage seemed shut. She stood there anyway and sang, because she knew her voice wasn't just worth hearing. It was needed. She had always felt like an outsider. Her fragile, almost translucent confidence couldn't survive in a world that only celebrated delicate bodies and porcelain faces. In an era when beauty was defined by the ethereal Audrey Hepburn, Cass Elliot, with her full figure and open heart, felt like a monster among angels. But she dreamed of singing, not just being near music, but breathing it, dissolving into it, finding her freedom and her worth within it. And yet, every step toward that dream brought pain, humiliation, and unreturned affection. For the chance to be close to Doherty, a member of the new group, the New Journeymen, Cass was willing to do anything. She followed them like a lost soul chasing warmth. In return, she got nothing but cold shoulders. They treated her like a clingy fan getting in the way of real work. They told her to fetch drinks, run errands, like she was a helper, not a gifted singer. And on rare occasions, they'd let her rehearse, but never perform. It was a cruel game of hope, and she always ended up losing. But fate, fickle and unpredictable, was already preparing a twist. The New Journeymen had gotten too comfortable with the party scene, spending more on fun and substances than on their music. Eventually, they were broke and homeless. And that's when they knocked on her door in Los Angeles. Cass opened it. Not just the door, she opened a chance. She wasn't that overlooked girl anymore. She had a home, she had a voice, and, if only for a moment, she had power, and she used it. Some say she offered them a deal they couldn't refuse. For the first time, she was the one calling the shots. Maybe Doherty never came to love her body. Maybe her love was never returned. But on that night, when desperate musicians stood on her doorstep, Cass Elliot knew one thing. From now on, everything would be different. Imagine a young woman with a voice warm enough to melt even the coldest heart. Her name was Cass Elliot. She dreamed of the stage, of hearing her songs on the radio, of earning recognition not because of how she looked, but because of what she could do. But the road to that dream wasn't just rough. It was humiliating, cruel, and filled with a pain she hid behind wide smiles and infectious laughter. The official story of her rise to fame always had a touch of the miraculous. They said that one day, while walking the streets of St. Thomas, a metal pipe fell from a construction site and hit her on the head. The blow, so the story went, somehow altered her vocal cords and gave her the soaring range John Phillips had been looking for. It sounded strange, almost like a fable, but for a long time this was the version told to the press. Maybe because it was easier that way. Easier than telling the truth, which was far less romantic. The truth, as it often does, came out later, and it held no trace of magic. The reality was that Cass desperately wanted to be part of the group, but John Phillips couldn't accept her appearance. He thought she didn't fit the image and refused to let her in, despite her undeniable talent. According to some, it all came down to an ultimatum. Either she sings with them or he sleeps on the street. And that's how Cass finally became part of what would become the Mamas and the Papas. The name itself came out of a foggy, sleepless night, one of those nights when the world feels malleable and full of possibility. And with it, the golden years began. Songs like California Dreamin' and Monday exploded on the charts. Cass's voice didn't just carry the melody, it carried the soul of a generation. Honest, powerful, and unmistakably human. But fame has its shadows. Behind the curtain, inside the band, the jokes about her weight never stopped. They didn't just laugh behind her back. They wove the mockery into their music. In Creek Alley, one line stung deeper than most. "No one's getting fat except Mama Cass." And just like that, the nickname Mama stuck. Something she never chose, and something she never quite managed to shake off. It was a betrayal, not just of friendship, but of the art she came for. Cass joined the group for the music, for the chance to be heard. What she got in return were taunts and humiliation from people she once trusted. One moment in particular, never fully revealed, crossed a line. A moment so hurtful, it left a mark deeper than words. Cass had given everything for that spotlight. Not just her voice, but her soul. And yet she sang. Again and again. Because in every note, she poured her hope. The hope that someday, the world would hear not the mockery, but the music. She loved him. Truly, with her whole heart, desperately. This wasn't a passing crush or a fleeting infatuation. It was the kind of love that doesn't ask questions, doesn't bargain, doesn't look for gain. Cass Elliot, full of wit, fire, and life, threw herself into her love for Doherty like a moth to flame, blind to the fact that the fire was consuming her. And he looked right past her. While Cass was drowning in unrequited love, Doherty had already moved on, to the one woman Cass feared most, the dazzling, untouchable Michelle Phillips. When Doherty finally told her, bluntly, that he was involved with Michelle, her world fell apart. Her heart clenched with a bitter ache. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal, striking her at her most vulnerable. One day, voice shaking with pain, Cass confronted Michelle. "You could have any man in the world. Why did you take the only one I loved?" And still, even after the confession, even after the humiliation, Cass held on. She believed maybe one day he'd change his mind. Maybe he'd see her, truly see her. Years passed. Only decades later did Doherty reveal that one night, Cass had proposed to him. He stayed silent, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he was too drunk to grasp the weight of her words. For her, it was a last, desperate attempt to cling to a dream. For him, just another hazy moment lost to alcohol, remembered only when it was far too late. Cass never screamed her pain to the world. She sang it. She hid it in her music, in her raspy laugh, in the larger-than-life persona of the lovable, unbreakable soul of the mamas and the papas. But behind the curtain, there was loneliness, exhaustion, and a dangerous mix of substances. Music and drugs became the swings that lifted her to euphoric highs and then hurled her into crashing lows. In 1967, she arrived in London ahead of the rest of the band for an important show. But instead of fanfare, she was greeted by cold handcuffs and a night in jail, allegedly for stealing bedsheets from the apartment where she was staying. The story made little sense, and rumors swirled that the arrest had nothing to do with linens, and everything to do with something more serious. Something people preferred not to say out loud. That was her life. Loud, chaotic, sometimes absurd, often heartbreaking, and always painfully real. Too real to be ignored. In a world where music and scandal often intertwine inseparably, Cass's story is far more than just that of a singer. It is a tale of struggle, pain, and hope that beat fiercely within her soul. Rumors swirled around her, threatening to undo everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Among the many alleged lovers was a man named P.K. Dawson, a figure with a dark past and an even darker reputation. But Cass wasn't the only one drawn to him. Local London authorities were also hunting him down. Dawson wasn't just her companion. He was her supplier, which made him a far more serious threat in the eyes of the law. The police decided to use the accusations against Cass as a way to get to him. One night, Cass found herself behind bars in London, possibly facing serious charges. The long hours in captivity, the cold prison walls, all of it squeezed her heart, forcing her to wonder what would come next. But when she finally stood before the magistrate, the evidence fell short, and the case was dismissed. Still, the scandal left a deep scar on her reputation. Negative press, cold stares, and rejection from event organizers forced her band to cancel performances. The world that once felt so close suddenly turned hostile. Cass ended her journey with the mamas and the papas with a broken heart and bitter words, her only reply to the storm around her. Yet, even amid the pain, a spark of hope burned within her. Her solo hit, "Dream a Little Dream of Me," became more than just a song. It was a manifesto for a new life, a new dream she was determined to chase. After the group's breakup, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Cass headed to Las Vegas, where her big break awaited, a major contract at the legendary Caesar's Palace. The deal, an unimaginable sum, promised to launch her solo career into stardom. But with this opportunity came immense pressure. Knowing she was now on her own and that audiences would demand perfection, Cass subjected herself to extreme tests of body and spirit. For 7 months, she endured a punishing diet, fasting 4 days a week, pushing herself to the limits of strength and willpower. This harsh journey was her way of trying to control the chaos around her, proving to herself that she could endure anything. In this time of pain and hope, loss and new beginnings, Cass wasn't just living her days. She was writing a chapter of her life filled with drama and resilience, a chapter that captivates and holds you breathless. Cass had lost 1/3 of her body weight. It seemed like the long-awaited breakthrough was finally within reach. But this victory proved to be bitter and deceptive. The diet that was supposed to make her leaner and stronger turned into a disaster. Her body became severely depleted, and her health started to fail one problem after another. Just before her first big show in Las Vegas, Cass was battling acute tonsillitis, bleeding vocal cords, mononucleosis, and a dangerous case of hepatitis, all terrifying consequences of harsh and relentless dieting experiments. She was completely unprepared for what came next. Vegas had gathered true legends, Sammy Davis Jr., Jimi Hendrix, Mia Farrow, all came to see Cass make her debut. But due to illness, she barely managed to rehearse a single line. When Cass finally took the stage, the audience fell silent in anticipation. Nervousness and weakness took over. Her voice was barely audible, words tangled, and fear coursed through her veins. This was not the Cass who once shone and captivated hearts. Now she was fighting against herself and her failing body. Her contract required her to perform twice each evening, and after a short break, she tried to salvage the situation with the second show. But her voice continued to give out, and the audience grew increasingly indifferent and impatient. Ultimately, disappointed spectators left the venue, and Caesar's Palace management had no choice but to terminate her contract. The blows didn't stop there. The very next day, the media showed no mercy. Newsweek harshly compared her Las Vegas failure to the sinking of the Titanic. In this dark moment, Cass fell into a deep depression. But amidst the gloom, there was one bright spot. Just weeks before signing the contract, she had become a mother to a healthy baby girl named Owen. Despite all the challenges in her personal life and career, her love for her daughter was the one thing that kept Cass from completely breaking down. She was a mother with pride and fire, protecting her daughter not just as a parent, but like a knight ready to fight for what mattered most. Nannies who dared to get too close, threatening the fragile peace of her family or the daughter's reputation, were quickly shown the door. She guarded her daughter's privacy like a rare jewel, shielding her from the relentless glare of the press and prying eyes. But eventually, the secret came to light. When journalists discovered the child's existence, Cass stood firm, never revealing the father's identity. She had the strength to withstand the pressure, refusing to break, even as rumors and whispers swirled around her like dark clouds on the horizon. And there were darker rumors still, ones that followed her throughout her career, never letting her rest. Cass threw legendary parties in Hollywood, gathering stars who were bright, sometimes dangerous. It's said that Charles Manson himself once attended one of these gatherings, a man whose horrific cult and bloody crimes cast a shadow over history. How close Cass really was to that darkness no one knew for sure, but it was close enough that many began to look at her differently, with suspicion and unease. After the horrific murders committed by Manson and his followers, John Phillips didn't hesitate to blame Cass. He accused her of letting those demons into their circle and even held her responsible for Sharon Tate's death. Fortunately, authorities didn't support these claims, but the shadow of that story hung over her for a long time. Cass's career in Las Vegas began to decline, and her solo success slowed down. Still, she kept appearing on television, performing in various shows, hosting her own programs, Mama Cass and Don't Call Me Mama. But deep inside, beyond the lights and applause, she dreamed of something more. A true love, the kind that always slipped through her fingers despite fame and the company she kept. And then, when hope seemed almost lost, love found her unexpectedly. Like a light in a dark room, a quiet whisper amid the chaos of life. The next morning, the secretary finally dared to open the door to her bedroom, and was met with a heartbreaking scene. She lay motionless, as if the world itself had frozen in that very moment. Life had slipped away, likely from a sudden heart attack. But the truth was rarely so simple. Soon, the winds of gossip carried a cruel tale. Rumors spread that she had choked on a ham sandwich, an absurd accusation meant to wound a woman who had spent her entire life fighting an unequal battle with her own body and a society set against her. For years later, in that very same room, at the same age of 32, Keith Moon, the drummer of The Who, passed away. Their fates seemed mysteriously intertwined, as if an invisible thread connected them across time and space. After her death, her daughter moved in with the singer's younger sister, Leah. Yet it wasn't until years later that the mystery of her secret lover and the father of her child was finally revealed. It was none other than Michelle Phillips' connection. The man was Chuck Day, the second guitarist on the hit Monday, and a singer from California. Then, in October 2022, justice was finally served. Cass was posthumously honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, long overdue and well-deserved. The ceremony was attended by family and friends, including Michelle Phillips herself, the very person who helped uncover forgotten truths. At a time when society belittled and humiliated people because of their weight, with cruel jokes thrown openly in their faces, Cass fought harder than anyone to remain true to herself and preserve her dignity in a world where compassion was a rare luxury. Her story is one of resilience, a testament to how a single life can become a symbol in the fight against prejudice and pain. She was immense, not just in voice, but in presence. In the United States, her name resonated louder than anywhere else, as if destiny itself had bestowed upon her a greatness that was impossible to ignore. When the legendary band the Mamas and the Papas reunited in 1998 to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they performed California Dreamin', but one of them, Cass, couldn't be there. To fill the void left by her absence, the group brought in 3 backing vocalists. Yet none could capture that unique power, that unmistakable spark Cass brought with her. Her voice was more than just sound. It was heart and soul, something impossible to replicate. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. There are many more vivid stories like this to come. The next morning,